Good afternoon and welcome to Legal Matters. My name is Tulani Mututa. I am your host and your moderator, and I am the orator for the law. I am joined today in the studio by a renowned guest, one who is not worthy of the term expert but worthy of the term guru, Mr. Moses Nkomo, who is a leading intellectual property lawyer in Zimbabwe and has contributed drastically to the body of intellectual property law in Zimbabwe and also the education of lawyers, as he is also a lecturer at the University of Zimbabwe. Mr. Nkomo, welcome to Legal Matters. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Tulani. You've done a good job advertising me. But like you said, my name is Moses Nkomo.
Yes.
I am a lawyer. This is my 19th year of practice of law.
19th?
Yes, 1 year shy of 20.
Okay.
I started practicing intellectual property when I started practice in 2002.
2002?
Yes.
So that brings it to around 17.
It's 19 years.
19 years of doing intellectual property
law.
Okay.
I started lecturing intellectual property law at the University of Zimbabwe in 2007. That makes it 14 years of lecturing intellectual property. I registered an intellectual property consultancy company called IPIQ Business Solutions in 2012.
Okay.
So it's 9 years old.
Sorry, may you just please backtrack a bit for our listeners who may just want to look it up on the internet. It's called IP what?
IPIQ.
IPIQ. Okay.
Business Solutions.
Okay, and it focuses on issues that have to do with intellectual property law.
Intellectual property strategy.
Okay.
The interface between intellectual property and business strategy.
Okay.
How businesses can leverage on intellectual property for
All right.
sustainability.
Okay, that's really amazing. And as I was also looking up your profile, Mr. Nkomo, I understand you wrote quite an interesting article on small and medium enterprises and how exactly they can just leverage on intellectual property to boom their businesses.
Actually, Tulani, I've written close to 30 articles on SMEs and intellectual property.
That's
so
really amazing, Mr. Nkomo, yes.
It's something that I'm passionate about. So I usually introduce myself as the IP lawyer, the IP lecturer, the IP consultant, and the IP evangelist.
Okay.
I bear the good news on intellectual property.
Intellectual property, yes. Well, Legal Matters listeners, there you have it. We have the incarnation or the personification of intellectual property law in the studio today. And we're coming to you live and direct from the Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services studio. And today we are excited to be on Legal Matters because we are launching a special series on intellectual property law that is called The Law and Practice of Intellectual Property in Zimbabwe. So it's going to be a 3-part series, and today the topic we have is the law of intellectual property, which is more of an icebreaker to the series as we will go out of the studio, go to Mr. Nkomo's place of business and understand how exactly institutions in Zimbabwe have been using intellectual property law and intellectual property strategies to better their businesses. And then lastly, we will also have a conference on intellectual property law that we will be covering courtesy of ARIPO, which is the African Regional African Intellectual Property Organization. So it's going to be exciting, and stay tuned to Heart and Soul because we'll be exclusively airing out the episodes on intellectual property as part of the series. So today we're going to get into understanding how exactly intellectual property law functions in Zimbabwe. And as always, Legal Matters is passionate about 3 things. The first one, legal awareness. So by the end of the show, all the listeners are going to know what intellectual property law is. Secondly, we are going to talk about the application of intellectual property law in your daily lives so that you understand how exactly you can use the knowledge that we're sharing out on Heart and Soul to transform it into power. And then lastly, we'll just get into understanding the importance of intellectual property law because Legal Matters is a bridge. So we want to provide access for the people to the institutions that deal with intellectual property law so that they too can also take up these advantages. So Mr. Nkomo, please, just as an icebreaker, what exactly would you think about defining the topic that we have today, the law of intellectual property? Because like you said, you're a lecturer and most students who are in law school would understand that there is no one definition or one set criteria that is set to define anything. So I'm really keen to hear what, after all those 19 years of doing intellectual property, have taught you about what the law of intellectual property is.
Thank you very much, Tulani. Allow me to bend over backwards a little bit and demystify the concept of intellectual property.
Amazing.
Amazing. Then we'll deal with intellectual property law.
Yes.
Because my experience has taught me that a lot of people do not appreciate what intellectual property is.
Yes, yes.
But basically, when you're talking of intellectual property, you're talking about the product of the human intellect.
Okay.
That which you produce by applying your mind.
Okay.
We are talking about the product of the human mind.
Yes.
You may be seated and you are thinking and you conceive
something, yes,
an idea that you further process, whether into a poem, into a book,
yes,
into a song,
yes,
into an invention.
Yes. So, Mr. Nkomo,
yes,
by that definition, do you mean to say that this very show, Legal Matters, is a product of intellectual property?
If you want to think of it, anything under the sun that human beings do is intellectual property.
Okay, yes. Because so, it all comes from the mind.
Somebody conceives it
in
their mind.
Yes.
You know, so when you're talking of intellectual property, intellect is the human mind.
Okay.
And property is a product.
Yes.
Or an article or of something that comes out of the application of the human mind.
Okay.
So when you talk intellectual property, you're talking of products of the human mind.
Yes.
And insofar as the human mind traverses a variety of fields, intellectual property is therefore very pervasive.
Yes.
So
it's involved in a lot of things, like
in everything that human beings
in the
do.
very nice jacket that you're putting on.
Exactly.
Yes.
In the technology that we're using to reach out to your audience.
Yes.
In literally everything that we interact with.
Mr. Nkomo, I have to thank you there for being the expert, because now that we are clear about what intellectual property is, I really understand why you felt the need to backtrack and define it, because it's the starting point before we now get into the law of intellectual property.
Indeed.
Yes.
So when you then talk of the law of intellectual property, you're now talking about the rules and the regulations that govern the products of the human mind.
Okay, yes.
So the states, governments, you have put in place mechanisms to regulate how human beings interact with products of the human mind.
Mr. Nkomo, I have to stop you there, and I don't know if I am the only one who is getting this question, but now I have to ask Mr. Nkomo, why was there that apparent need for the law, or for the government, or for the people in essence, to recognize that there is such a thing as intellectual property? Because here at Legal Matters, we have 3 segments, and on the first segment, on Law Watch, we're going to talk about the current affairs aspects with regards to intellectual property law, and also the rise or the need. So I'm really keen to understand, as in, how exactly did intellectual property evolve? What exactly came into the minds of men to say, okay, what I have thought about today needs to be my property, or I need to get some benefit from it?
Let me attempt to address your question this way.
Yes.
So intellectual property rights, what the law regulates are intellectual property rights.
Rights, okay.
It defines what rights the creator of a work has in respect of their property.
Okay.
Just like if you have your nice watch, you have a right to regulate how the rest of the world interacts with you and with your watch.
Yes.
Because it is your property.
Amazing example there.
Yes. So the need for intellectual property protection stems from 2 basic premises.
Okay.
One is to reward those that apply their mind to coming up with useful products.
And it's funny that you say reward, Mr. Nkomo, because one thing or one misconception that the general public has, or one thing they do not know, is that more gold has been mined from the mines of men than from the mines of the earth. So when you say reward, we are trying to get the people to understand that intellectual property has to transform into monetary value.
Intellectual property intrinsically has value.
Okay.
You know, I was privileged in 2014 to be part of the Mandela Washington Fellowship.
Okay.
The address by the then US President Barack Obama, he
Yes.
says Africa needs to realize that its biggest asset is not the natural resources, but the intellectual capital of its people.
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Nkomo. That's really amazing, because what I just thought about from hearing that, it's explosive. Please go on. Yes.
So the diamonds will run out.
Yes,
the
definitely.
gold will exhaust.
Definitely.
But the human mind, as long as we are alive,
it will not exhaust.
It will not exhaust. We will continue to generate ideas, we will continue to conceive solutions and products.
I think, Mr. Nkomo, on that list of intellectual property things that you do, you might as well add business motivation, because for the entrepreneurs who are out there and listening, I really hope they understand that it's not essentially about what you have, but it's essentially about what your mind can produce.
Indeed. So we're saying the first premise is the incentive or the reward.
The reward, yes.
Okay. Then the second one is to encourage the dissemination of works.
All right.
Why? Because one of the theories that have been used to explain intellectual property rights is the social contract.
Okay. Yes.
Where the government says, you go on and produce.
Yes.
We'll give you protection for a limited period of time.
Okay.
But in exchange for that, please make your works available.
Okay. Yes.
So it allows knowledge to be brought to the table.
All right.
Why? Because the creator is assured that they will recoup their investment from the exclusive rights that the law gives. So that's the social contract.
And I think also just the issue of dissemination, it also touches on the right of access to information, or the need for people to just know what's going on out there. So I feel like the dissemination part there is also really important, and people really need to understand how it functions.
So you're very correct, Tulani. What we are saying is the intellectual property law, when you're talking of governing or regulating, it seeks to strike a balance between the apparently conflicting interests of the creator on the one hand and of the general public on the other hand. The general public wants access. The creator wants exclusivity. And the law then comes in and they say, Tulani, you created this. We are giving you exclusive rights for a given period of time, subject to exceptions. The exceptions then allow for the exploitation of that work in the public interest.
Through resale and redistribution and things like that.
So they are prescribed exceptions where you have exclusive rights, but talk of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are patents that are associated with the medicines, with the diagnostics, with all the medical technology that is associated. But because of the seriousness of the pandemic, governments can invoke compulsory licensing. Makes sense. So that they make without authority of the owner.
Because it's something that the public direly needs.
Exactly.
So it's also just interesting to know that issues of intellectual property are not just only on the issue of money or on the issue of some reward, but then they also contribute to the betterment of humanity through discoveries or through innovations that are linked to medicine, like what you're saying.
So what we're saying is, when somebody is assured of an incentive, they have motivation to wake up early in the morning and go on and
they
apply their mind to come up with something better, take the technology to the next level, because they know they will be rewarded. Or at the very least, they will be recognized for the effort that they've made. But
certainly.
They are also performing a public good in solving society's significant problems at any given time. So the intellectual property law comes in to govern one of the explanations that are given for intellectual property rights are that intellectual property rights are in the category of rights called subjective rights.
Okay, by subjective meaning they are yours, also to say.
Right. When we're talking of subjective rights, we are saying these are rights that are dual in nature.
Okay.
I, as the creator of a poem, I have a relationship with my poem.
Yes.
But that poem has a relationship with the general public.
Yes, it does.
So there is a dual relationship.
Yes, it does, yes.
I have a relationship of ownership with it.
Yes.
The public has an interest in its consumption.
Okay, yes.
So the subjective nature of intellectual property rights then requires rules that regulate how I relate to my product and how the general public relates to my product.
Yes, okay.
They need to recognize that this is my work.
Okay, yes.
They need to acknowledge that insofar as it tickles their fancy, it belongs to somebody.
Yes.
And they need to respect that.
Yes.
So that is what intellectual property law comes in to do.
Maybe just to understand more or paint a picture. So in that same vein, say an artist creates a song, then they have copyrights for that track. The public cannot then go ahead and distribute that product without the owner's consent, so to speak, or without some due acknowledgement, as you're saying.
So in terms of, to follow on the example of copyright that you have given.
The example of music that's more common in Zimbabwe.
So in terms of the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act, there are exclusive rights that are given to the creator or owner of copyright in a musical work. One of, or some of the rights include the right of reproduction. And when you download a musical work and you save it on your phone, that is reproduction. You will have reproduced, you have created a copy of that work. When you share it to your contacts in your WhatsApp list, you have distributed that particular work. And when you play it while you are in a combi, you have performed that work in public. So all those are exclusive rights that are given to the owner of copyright in that particular work.
Rather a colorful example that you gave there, Mr. Nkomo. So our listeners on Legal Matters are really intrigued by how we're coming at this issue of intellectual property, just deciding this from the responses we're getting about the issue of the law of intellectual property on its own. So Mr. Nkomo, you have done quite a really tremendous and commendable job in trying to break down some of these key principles of the whole intellectual property law wave and its evolution. So we'll just take a short break and then come back and discuss the legal frameworks now in the international arena and also in Zimbabwe, so that we just get to understand how the ordinary Zimbabwean can actually access these institutions that deal with intellectual property, how they also can also get intellectual property rights that, as you said, have exclusive natures which give them incentives and also which are just subjective to what they reproduce and also what their skills are. So the issue of intellectual property, like what Mr. Nkomo was saying, it's wholesome and it cuts through so many sectors, through so many professions, and it's really something that everyone really needs to take heed of. So stay tuned on Legal Matters. We'll be right back after the break, and we'll just be playing a short advert from Doves, and it's Working Wednesday as always on Legal Matters, and we are proud to also disseminate information about this amazing innovative initiative that the government of Zimbabwe is doing with the International Labour Organization, the Employment Confederation of Zimbabwe, and also the ZCTU. So if you're interested in issues that have to do with labor, safe working conditions within the working space, be sure to check out the International Labour Organization initiative brought to you by the government of Zimbabwe. So stay tuned to Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services, where we are communicating for change and communicating about change.
Wouldn't you like to know? Wouldn't you like to know when you're about to die? For every jog or walk you add 1 year to your life expectancy. And for every cough or sneeze, you subtract 1 year from your life expectancy. You can forget all of that nonsense and join Zororo Pumulani's repatriation and funeral plan from 79 rands per month. And you can get cover of up to 30,000 rands to anywhere in Zimbabwe. Zororo Pumulani, powered by doves, for the ones you love. Wouldn't you like to know when you're about to die? For every jog or walk, you add 1 year to your life expectancy. And for every cough or sneeze, you subtract 1 year from your life expectancy. You can forget all of that nonsense and join Zororo Pumulani's repatriation and funeral plan from 79 rands per month. And you can get cover of up. Wouldn't you like to know when you're about to die? For every jog or walk, you add 1 year to your life expectancy. And for every cough or sneeze, you subtract 1 year from your life expectancy. You can forget all of that nonsense and join Zororo Pumulani's repatriation and funeral plan from 79 rands per month. And you can get cover of up to 30,000 rands to anywhere in Zimbabwe. Zororo
Good afternoon. We are back on Legal Matters, coming to you live and direct from Harare, the heartbeat of the nation. You're listening to Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. I am joined today on Legal Matters by an expert, a renowned personification of intellectual property law, a man who has dedicated his vocation in the law to bettering the jurisprudence and also the legal system in Zimbabwe with regards to intellectual property law. So we are now moving on to our Legal Wise segment, and in this segment we are going to ask Mr. Nkomo to clarify how exactly the rules that govern the things that come from our mind operate. And then after that we'll jump into the law in action segment, and we'll just get to understanding the importance of intellectual property law in Zimbabwe, its importance for businesses, its importance for you on an individual basis. So, Mr. Nkomo, the floor is yours. Let's get into it.
Thank you again, Tulani. So, intellectual property law operates at different levels.
Okay.
But I wish to highlight a fundamental principle of intellectual property law, which is called the principle of territoriality.
Territoriality.
Yes.
Okay, that's a tongue twister.
So, what we mean when we say intellectual property rights are territorial, we are saying that intellectual property rules and regulations operate in a particular geographical space, or a particular jurisdiction.
Okay, so we are trying to say that intellectual property rights operate in accordance, say maybe in Zimbabwe alone, in Africa alone, and then world over.
So what we are saying is intellectual property law in Zimbabwe is regulated by Zimbabwean statutes.
Okay, yes.
If it is copyright,
yes,
it is governed by the Zimbabwean Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
If it is trademarks, the same applies.
The same applies, yes.
Yes. So you cannot ordinarily expect protection of a work that was created in Zimbabwe in a jurisdiction other than Zimbabwe. Okay?
Yes, so it's
you cannot enforce your rights in a jurisdiction other than where you sought and procured protection.
Okay, yes.
All right?
Yes, so you cannot claim your rights in America when you have protection in Zimbabwe.
Generally. So the general principle is that intellectual property rights are territorial.
And Mr. Nkomo, it's funny for you to say general, because I just remembered one joke we used to share around whilst in law school, that for every law there is the general rule, and then there's always an exception.
Indeed. So there are always exceptions to these general rules. And these exceptions now bring in international and regional intellectual property frameworks. And we're just going to quickly run through the international frameworks, the regional frameworks, then we zero in on the state of intellectual property law in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
At international level, there is a specialized United Nations agency. It's called the World Intellectual Property Organization.
That's commonly known as WIPO.
WIPO, yes.
WIPO,
So WIPO is the organization that is mandated by the United Nations to oversee the development, promotion, protection of intellectual property at a global level. The WIPO has come up with a number of conventions and treaties which set international best practice.
And Zimbabwe is bound by these international best practices.
So Zimbabwe is a member of the World Intellectual Property Organization. The protocols and the treaties and the conventions are subject to Section 327 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. It's only those conventions and treaties that have been ratified and domesticated
that apply in
Zimbabwe. Otherwise,
it does not
they do not apply.
So and I feel like that's also one thing the public needs to understand, because the news will tell you that Zimbabwe signed this treaty, but then on its ratification alone, it may not automatically make it transform into law, and people don't know about these things. So thank you very much for clarifying that for our listeners.
Sure, thanks. So we have a number of treaties and conventions that have been adopted at WIPO. In the literary arts and that space, you have the Berne Convention for the protection of literary and artistic works. Zimbabwe has ratified the Berne Convention. Now it then brings the exception to the principle of territoriality, and I think our listeners need to get that very clearly. Because Zimbabwe is party to the Berne Convention, a copyright work that is protectable in Zimbabwe is protected in all the other member states
in the world
of the Berne Convention.
Let's backtrack on that and use that example that you gave, Mr. Nkomo. So what we are now saying is this: if you protect your intellectual property in Zimbabwe, and then you are also distributing that intellectual property in America, it becomes protected by virtue of the Berne Convention.
Yes, the Berne Convention affords protection to citizens of member states. So what I may also quickly add is the principle of national treatment. That is part of the Berne Convention. The principle of national treatment binds all members of the Berne Convention to give citizens or nationals of other member states the same kind of protection that it gives to its own citizens.
Meaning to say there is no discrimination between work that is done by an American in Zimbabwe and work that is done by a Zimbabwean.
Exactly. So work that is done by a start-up musician out of Mbare is given equal protection to the work of Justin Bieber or any other superstar.
Amazing. That really is amazing.
Out of America. So that is called the principle of national treatment. It's part of the international framework, international standards for the protection of intellectual property. So you also have the Madrid Protocol for the protection of trademarks. You have the Paris Convention for the protection of industrial property. All these are administered by the World Intellectual Property Organization.
If you may allow me to just jump in there, Mr. Nkomo, with a quick question. Or rather maybe a quick clarification I would require for our audience. Most people were really intrigued to find that there are so many aspects of intellectual property, or so many things. And as we have been progressing on the show, we have talked about patents, trademarks, and industrial designs like you're hinting on now. So how exactly vast is the body of intellectual property, and what exactly then cascades into the rather common or the rather issues that in Zimbabwe we may talk about, which is why, for instance, I prefer the example of music, because it's something that people generally understand and they follow on a day-to-day basis.
So the field of intellectual property is as broad as the breadth of human endeavor.
Yes, yes.
Talk of agriculture.
Yes.
There is intellectual property in agriculture.
Yes, yes.
Talk of arts, there is intellectual property in arts.
Yes.
Talk of traditional knowledge, traditional cultural expressions, your dances, your folklore, all those constitute intellectual property. So you have intellectual property is divided broadly into two classes. One is copyright and related rights. That deals with literary and artistic works. Then you have what is called industrial property. In industrial property, that's where you have patents, industrial designs, utility models, trademarks, trade secrets, confidential information, geographical indications, and other emerging types of intellectual property.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I'm sure, well, for me, it shed more light. So I'm sure the same goes for our listeners.
Sure. I was about to go to the other instrument at international level that is administered by the World Trade Organization. It's called the Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, commonly known as the TRIPS Agreement.
The TRIPS Agreement.
This agreement probably sets the highest standards of intellectual property protection at a global level. It has been criticized as a one-size-fits-all. But it sets the bar quite high for the protection and promotion of intellectual property rights. And it particularly is important in spaces of trade and economics. So that's the other standard.
And I also think that's really topical because we are going to be doing an international trade law episode on legal matters. So I'm really glad to hear that even on that front as well, there's adequate protection with regards to trade in Zimbabwe and also trade on a global scale.
Yes, there really is. So that's the international level. So you have WIPO and you have the WTO. The WTO is particularly important because unlike the voluntary protocols that the other WIPO agencies have come up with, with the WTO, there was a requirement that if you wanted to be a member of the WTO, you had to be TRIPS compliant. So the WTO came into being in 1995. Developing countries were given up to 10 years to put their laws in order so that they are TRIPS compliant. Otherwise, you'll be kicked out of the club.
The WTO.
Right? So it kind of became compulsory. And the standards are quite high. All right, so that's the international level. Then you have regional intellectual property systems.
And by regional, we're now talking about?
So I'll give you examples. In the European countries, you have the European Patent Office. That coordinates issues to do with patents in the European region. In Africa, we have two regional intellectual property organizations. One mainly for the English-speaking African countries in West, East, and Southern Africa. It's called the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, ARIPO. Its headquarters is in Harare. Then you have OWAPI, whose headquarters is in Cameroon. It caters mainly for the French-speaking West and West and Central African countries. Then there was an initiative that was called the Pan-African Intellectual Property Organization. It hasn't quite taken off well. But how do these work? These are voluntary intergovernmental organizations. So states are free to join ARIPO. ARIPO is a number of mandates. So they have a trademark mandate under what is known as the Banjul Protocol for the Protection of Trademarks in ARIPO. It has the Harare Protocol on the protection of patents, industrial designs, and utility models. It has the Arusha Protocol on the protection of plant varieties.
Yes, yes.
It has the Kampala protocol
Yes.
on the voluntary registration of trademarks.
Yes, and it's also amazing that in Zimbabwe we also have a protocol that was named after our city.
So
yes.
they name them after the city in which the particular protocol was adopted.
Yes, yes.
So
it also speaks volumes as to the readiness or the institutions we have in Zimbabwe that are just ready to aid the people in the enforcement, protection, and also development of these intellectual property rights.
Indeed.
Yes.
So Aripo has done quite well in promoting and protecting intellectual property rights.
All right.
But the protection under Aripo is subject to the territoriality principle.
Okay.
So Aripo is an administrative system.
Yes.
It doesn't give substantive rights.
Okay.
It just gives you an opportunity. For example, if you're dealing with patents, you can file one patent through the Aripo office and you designate the 18 member states. Then
so by territoriality, like what we're saying, it's now confined to those specific regions and not out of those regions.
The specific countries that are members to the particular protocol. Like I said, the Harare Protocol has 18 member states.
Yes. It's a voluntary, unlike the world one where it's
where you are forced to.
Yes.
So this one is voluntary.
Yes.
The Arusha Protocol, it has failed to fly because it was adopted in 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Up to now, it still has 4 member states.
Yes.
Because people are not quite persuaded.
Yes. By the initiative.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how the regional system works.
Okay.
Then you come to the national system.
Yes.
Where you have laws that are enacted by the Parliament of Zimbabwe.
Okay.
In Zimbabwe, we have the Patents Act, we have the Trademarks Act, we have the Industrial Designs Act, we have the Seeds Act, you have the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act.
Yes.
So these are acts that are relevant.
Which is really a rather broad framework of the law because there are so many acts. Yes.
Very broad spectrum. Actually, we have one of the best legal frameworks in terms of the laws themselves.
Yes.
We were one of the quickest countries to be TRIPS compliant.
Yes.
We were given up to 2005.
Yes.
By 2002, we were done and dusted. All our laws,
that's amazing,
had become TRIPS compliant.
Yes.
So, in terms of the legal framework, we have quite beautiful pieces of legislation.
Yes, we do.
The sad thing, while we are still at it, is that apart from what we were forced to do, we have never voluntarily reformed our laws. So the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act was last amended in 2004 in order to make it TRIPS compliant. A lot of issues have arisen.
And I also feel like the divide there is a gray area in which organizations that deal with intellectual property can also just lobby the government behind, because the government, of course, in as much as we are saying they have not gone the extra mile on the voluntary, I think in complying with the mandated stuff at an early stage, it really set up that platform that allows organizations to then take the button stick and run with it and further develop where they may seem to be lacking or leaks in terms of our law.
I tend to take a different thought. I'll give you the example of India. India now is called the pharmacy of the world. India is a developing country.
It is.
It delayed until the 31st of December 2005 to amend its Patents Act to make it TRIPS compliant. Between 1995 and 2005, it was busy exploiting the loopholes in the international system to develop capacity at a local level. For the enhancement of the pharmacy and medical technology industry. So there are a lot of dynamics that come into intellectual property law, especially at an international level.
So it's not really just for the civic societies or the organizations, but the government ultimately will have a responsibility.
The government has the primary responsibility to inform the reform of intellectual property laws in the light of national developmental objectives.
Which is why the government also has tried to undertake national development strategies in terms of intellectual property.
There has been effort, but I, for one, am not satisfied. We have an intellectual property strategy and implementation plan 2018 to 2022.
Yes.
I haven't seen much traction in that regard.
Okay.
It is not even mentioned in the National Development Strategy 1.
Yes, yes.
So there's this disconnect between
there is.
the national developmental trajectory
Yes.
and intellectual property.
Yes, which is really funny because if you try and look at it on the flip side, intellectual property is really the one thing that can lead to vast or quick national development, because that's ideally where all the ideas are coming from, so to say.
What we did when we were complying with TRIPS,
yes,
we cut and paste
okay,
generic provisions
yes,
from templates
okay,
that were sponsored by the West.
Okay. All right.
And the agenda, obviously, corporates in the United States of America want to protect their turf.
Yes, yes.
So they will give you as little room as possible.
As possible, yes, yes.
And we simply cut and paste.
Yes, which is ideally difficult whenever new laws are being drafted, because the law will always be a vehicle of change, but it needs to be aware to the surrounding circumstances, or it needs to be specific to our own specific conditions or our own specific circumstances within Zimbabwe.
I'll give you a very practical example.
Yes.
Again, I will have to resort to India, because India has been very practical.
Okay, yes.
When it comes to the exploitation of intellectual property.
Okay.
The rise of Bollywood
okay.
has been predominantly because of a deliberate policy thrust that the government of India has taken to promote the creation of local intellectual property.
All right.
So their national intellectual property strategy is very deliberate. It identifies the software sector.
Yes.
And most of the software that we are running in this country and in other parts of the world is Indian origin.
Yes.
The drugs that we are consuming are coming out of India. The entertainment.
Yes.
I mean, wives and daughters get glued to Bollywood.
They do. They do.
So it didn't happen as a fluke.
It did not.
It was a deliberate policy thrust that was taken,
Yes.
and the laws were actually amended in a way that promotes local production.
Yes.
So there was a case in which Novartis, the Swiss pharmaceutical company, sued generic drug manufacturers in India.
Okay.
And the courts in India said, you can go and hang. This is about our people.
Yes.
And we will interpret the law in a way that protects the rights, the right to health for our people.
Yes.
And the highest court in India dismissed the Novartis case.
Okay, yes. And I also think, in as much as you were saying, organizations or civic societies may not entirely be the one to run with the ball, but my understanding in Zimbabwe, we also have an intellectual property organization, ZIPO.
So the Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office is a department.
Okay.
It's actually a division in the Department of Deeds, Companies and Intellectual Property.
Yes.
In the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. So they are right at the back end.
I get that.
They are an obscure entity within a department in a ministry.
Yes.
And it's not even one of the priority.
Yes, it becomes a problem because in terms of resources, in terms of bureaucracy, and also in terms of just having a structure that enables them to move as quickly as intellectual property law requires. So maybe they do need more authority in terms of intellectual property issues and not to work in the back room of the ministry.
I totally agree with you on that. There has been conversations to make the office either autonomous or at the very least semi-autonomous, because it has the potential to generate a lot of revenue.
Yes, it does.
That can be invested in creating awareness and promoting the development of intellectual property in the country. And the country will be ultimately the beneficiary.
Yes, definitely. Well, listeners, there you have it. It's interesting. It's intellectual property law in Zimbabwe. It's the amazing series that we're bringing to you as Legal Matters. And today we are talking about the law of intellectual property with Mr. Moses Nkomo. And really, a lot of mist has been demystified. So, Mr. Nkomo, unfortunately on Legal Matters, time is always flying. And what was also just making it faster today was the issues and the depthness that you have with regards to these issues of intellectual property law. So just to round up the show, maybe we can just talk about briefly the importance of intellectual property law in Zimbabwe, and also just round up and also get our listeners prepared for the next episode that we'll be talking about the practice of intellectual property law in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, Tulani. I'll be very quick.
Okay.
An example is of the potency of intellectual property.
Yes.
Is none other than the United States of America.
Okay.
The President of the United States of America is required in terms of the Constitution of the US to report in his State of the Nation address the state of American intellectual property across the globe. You may have heard
that's amazing.
A couple of years ago the trade war between America and China.
Yes.
That war was fought on the turf of intellectual property.
Yes.
The gripe with America was that Chinese companies are copying American intellectual property.
Yes.
And the American government has an office of the U.S. trade representative in the office of the president, whose mandate is to monitor the performance of American intellectual property. The competitive edge of the American economy is not in its military might.
It's not.
It is in its intellectual property.
Yes. I really think you could not really overstate the importance of intellectual property, but those were some really great examples, because ideally what I am picking is intellectual property is the drive of the nation.
It is a driver of the nation.
Yes.
Which economy is the biggest economy in Africa right now? It is Nigeria.
Yes.
But it was not the same a few years ago.
It was not.
South Africa used to be the biggest economy.
Yes.
But when Nigeria took account of its creative sectors, your Nollywood and your other sectors, and they mapped its contribution to the GDP. They actually realized that it employs more people, it generates more revenue, it made Nigeria the biggest economy in Africa. So we need not overstate the importance.
Of intellectual
quickly
property,
the UDI government leveraged on intellectual property to bust sanctions.
Just in case some of our listeners are not really savvy with the history, the UDI, Unilateral Declaration of Independence,
the Ian Smith government. So if you look at the history of our intellectual property laws, our Patents Act is a 1971 Act. Designs Act is a 1971 Act. The Trademarks Act dates back to 1972. At a time when Ian Smith's government was under sanctions. That's when they developed all these research institutions in agriculture, veterinary sciences, and they developed homegrown solutions, import substitution, on the back of intellectual property laws.
And I feel like there's never been a better time for us as Zimbabweans to capitalize on this, because like you're saying, the benefits are also drastic if intellectual property just cross-cuts through so many issues of our daily lives. So I really hope our listeners will take up the initiative to secure the gold in their mind and understand how they can use intellectual property law and also the institutions that are available. Mr. Nkomo, before we round up the show, parting words to our listeners, and also just something else you might want to share with regards to the issue of intellectual property law.
Thank you, Tulani. My parting shot would be, the world has moved from being a resource-based world. We used to be told that the factors of production were land, labor, and capital. We are now in a knowledge economy where knowledge is the primary factor of production. And intellectual property is at the core of the knowledge economy. So it is time that our people wake up to the potency of intellectual property, embrace it, incorporate it into their business strategy, enhance its application in their daily lives. We will not be the same.
Well, definitely we will not be the same. Thank you very much, Mr. Nkomo, for that really powerful parting shot. Once again, we were talking about the law of intellectual property, part 1, to an interesting series that Mr. Nkomo partnering with the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, will be bringing to you via Legal Matters. So stay tuned and also just stay up to date with when we'll be having the second episode, which will be titled The Practice of Intellectual Property in Zimbabwe. So thank you very much. And Mr. Nkomo, if anyone wants to reach you, or if they're looking for some of the work you've done, how exactly do they go about it? Since we're living in a digital age, do you have any handles that they can maybe access your work, or maybe just communicate or contact you with regards to some questions or clarifications they may have?
So they can get me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Moses Nkomo.
Okay.
If they pick Moses Nkomo, they should find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm on Twitter.
Okay.
At DNM Law 2011.
Okay.
I'll repeat that, at DNM Law 2011.
Okay.
They can also find me on Facebook.
Okay.
They can find IPIQ Business Solutions.
Yes.
On Facebook.
Yes.
Then they can contact me on my mobile number.
Yes.
0773
Yes.
420
Yes.
660.
Okay.
That number is on WhatsApp as well.
Yes.
So we can chat on that platform.
Yes, and I might add on that Mr. Nkomo is really friendly and really lives in the world of intellectual property. So thank you very much for tuning into Legal Matters. My name is Tulani Mututa, orator for the law, and today we were talking about the law of intellectual property in Zimbabwe with an expert, a guru, Mr. Moses Nkomo. So enjoy the rest of the week and stay legal wise, and stay tuned to Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services, where we communicate for change and communicate about change.
Wouldn't you like to know when you're about to die? For every jog or walk, you add 1 year to your life expectancy. And for every cough or sneeze, you subtract 1 year from your life expectancy. You can forget all of that nonsense and join Zororo Pumulani's repatriation and funeral plan from 79 rands per month. And you can get cover of up to 30,000 rands to anywhere in Zimbabwe. Zororo Pumulani, powered by doves, for the ones you love.